How's it going, everyone? I'm Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and I am back with another 7 more games that will never leave my collection. As my collection keeps growing, as I keep acquiring more games, it's inevitable that I have to get rid of some games because my shelves just cannot hold anymore. And honestly, I just can't keep buying shelves and fitting them into this condo somehow because I'm gonna run out of space. And basically, this is not gonna be a place I live anymore. This will just be like a board game space, and I'll be like living out of my car or something. So as I get rid of stuff, I'm always thinking about the games that I'm not even going to consider getting rid of. And there's tons of games in my collection that I don't think will ever leave, but there's ones that I'm really sure that I'm never going to get rid of. And I did the video, like, this is the second one I'm obviously doing. I did a video in the past of 7 games I would never get rid of. I am confident saying that these 7 games I'm going to feature today are also another 7 games that will never leave my collection. So right before we get into this, I'm also going to let you know there's some kind of crazy like wind and rainstorm going on outside, and every so often the wind hits this building and it sounds like there is like a hurricane going on outside. So you might hear this like rumbling or something like that. I'll try to like avoid it or, you know, cut and refilm if something like that happens. But if you hear any of that in the background, just know we're having some kind of crazy, spring storm right now. So let's get right into it. These are 7 more games I will never get rid of, and we're gonna kick things off with somewhat new game, a new version of a game anyways, and that is, it's upside down, The Crew: A Mission Deep Sea. So The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9 is a phenomenal game, and honestly, this was the new version coming out, and I wasn't sure going into it, is this sort of cashing in on the success of The Crew? Is this an unnecessary, follow-up? And in many ways, if you are playing The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9 a lot, you don't buy a lot of games, you're not looking to get more games in your collection, this isn't necessarily a necessity to get if you have the Quest for Planet 9. But that being said, I own both in my collection, and I am confident in saying there's no way I'm going to keep both going forward. I just, having played Mission Deep Sea, yes, there are slightly less missions, but honestly, that's such a minor complaint because there are still so many missions in this box. This is just a way more interesting version of a game that was already super, super interesting. So for me, if I'm ever going to introduce The Crew to someone, if I'm ever going to sit down and play The Crew, I'm likely just going to play Mission Deep Sea because I honestly don't think there's any barrier to entry for new players. It's not like you need to start with the Quest for Planet 9 to be able to introduce someone to Mission Deep Sea. This is easy to get into as The Crew Mission Deep Sea, or the Quest for Planet 9 is. It just has more interesting mission cards. The cards are more varied. There's more things you're going to have to try to communicate with your teammates and try to discover as you're playing. I think there's more longevity in it because of that, even though there are slightly less missions. And I say slightly, it's only a slight decrease in the amount of missions. So honestly, for me, this is a game that's never going to leave my collection because of how much it surpasses the Quest for Planet 9. I think the Quest for Planet 9 will be on its way out of my collection somewhat soon, but Mission Deep Sea is going to stay in my collection forever because honestly, introducing this to players is super easy. It's my favorite trick-taking game by far. It's a game that is such a small box. It's so easy to bring places. It's so easy to fit on my shelf. I can't really complain about it taking up too much space, and I've never had a bad session of this game. It's so much fun. There's no way I'm going to be getting rid of this game anytime soon, unless, honestly, I guess the only caveat here, the only asterisk, is if they release a 3rd version of The Crew, which honestly they're probably going to release like 5 versions of The Crew in the lifetime of us playing board games. We're already on the 4th version of Azul. Maybe the newer versions end up continually replacing, versions of The Crew, but I can't, forecast what the future holds based on the games we have now, the information we have that we know now. This game is never going to leave my collection. All right, moving on to a somewhat newer game. I think this is a 2020 release. This may surprise some people because it's not necessarily like a mainstay in a game that a lot of people talk about, but it is a game that I really love, even if it is a bit niche, and that is Stellar. So Stellar is a 2-player card game from Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback. It's published by Renegade Games. I've talked about this a few different times on the channel. We also have a review and a how to play on the channel. This is a bit more of a niche title. That's not to say like, I've talked to lots of people who have played it and have enjoyed it, but it's also a game that doesn't necessarily get, universal attention or acclaim. And I think it's such a phenomenal 2-player game. And honestly, the reason it's never going to leave my collection is that sometimes I have a lot of 2-player games, and there's no shortage of 2-player games that I can go out and buy, and they become available every single year. But Stellar is one that just is, it's a very like I want to compare it to Lost Cities a lot, because Lost Cities is a game that is just grueling to play, but in the best way possible. You just feel every game of Lost Cities, every decision you make is so hard to make, and that's honestly what makes it so interesting of a game and one to come back to, because you're constantly thinking, oh, I could have done that decision differently, or oh, I need to approach this with a slightly different strategy. And Stellar is that, but it's so varied from game to game, depending on what cards are out in the row to select from, and even then, the choices you're making and how it influences, you know, if I play this card, I have to take this card with it. You're never going to be able to play it 100% perfectly optimally, and that is something that makes you want to come back to it constantly. And because there are no shortage of two-player games out there, to me, it's important to have a two-player game in my collection that is for more of the enthusiasts, someone that, you know, I'm not just introducing a game to for the first time. I've never introduced Stellar to someone for the first time, whether it be because I'm, you know, going on a date with someone, or because I have a new friend coming over, or an old friend coming over that has never played board games before. Stellar's not the game I'm introducing to them. That's not the reason it's going to be in my collection permanently. It's because when it comes to me and Carl playing games together, me and Braden playing games together, other friends that we play games with, that, you know, regularly play games and appreciate that deeper strategy, Stellar is one that I can always introduce. It's always going to be fun. It's always going to be like grueling laughs around the table, trying to think like, oh my god, what am I possibly going to do with this turn, or I can't do everything I want to do. And I've never had a bad game of Stellar, and I always do want to come back to it. It's a game that if anyone suggested, I would say, yep, let's go play Stellar, unless it was someone who, you know, didn't know what they were getting into, and maybe it's their first board game ever or something like that. So I think it's important in a collection to have games that you can introduce to anybody, because those are the ones that, you know, will get a lot of mileage. But it is important to have these enthusiast style games, and to me, that's what Stellar is. It's a two-player game that I just love playing, and I will always play with people that, you know, really appreciate that style of grindy, really difficult decision making in a two-player game, especially in such a small box, despite the fact that the table presence of this game, the real estate it takes up, is massive for how small this box is. But that being said, it's a game that I just will never get rid of. All right, next up is a game that I had many say they were surprised was not in the last video. I think Carlo was among them as well. It is, in fact, a game I will never get rid of. I just didn't feature in the last video, and I think this was also helped by the fact that since that last video, I've played it a lot, and I've come to realize I really just can never get rid of this game. And that is Patchwork. So I think, honestly, it's upside down. Oh my god, that's just painful to listen to when a box turns over. So Patchwork is a game that, honestly, the reason I didn't include it in the last video is my rationale was, at the time, I think I hadn't played it a lot in that, you know, in the couple months preceding that video, but also there's so many polyomino games getting released constantly that I thought, you know, for sure Patchwork could get replaced one day, because there's so many polyomino games coming out. Someone will come along with one that replaces Patchwork for me, and I will, you know, not need Patchwork in my collection. And while that's obviously possible, the more I've played Patchwork, and especially in this last year, I've played Patchwork and introduced it to new players a lot more than I ever have in my life. And that's due to the fact that I've been dating, and it's a really easy game to introduce to someone who, whether they have played board games or haven't played board games, it's just a great game to play with someone for the first time, and it's a relaxing game. It's an easy game to play with people. And I've just realized that I don't think anything is going to quite come along that in a two-player format specifically, two-player only, is this inviting in terms of its theme, can still be ridiculously mean in terms of what you're trying to accomplish in tiles you're stealing from players, or, you know, you're not taking a tile so that they don't have a choice of a tile that's coming up that they want. There's all these mean things you can do that you can, as you play Patchwork more with people, that can sort of be the meta that evolves. It has so many things going for it, not to mention the fact such a renowned designer in Uwe Rosenberg, that despite all the polyomino games I played, despite how much I enjoy those other polyomino games, as a two-player only small box inviting game that I can always introduce to people and enjoy myself every single time and seemingly never tire of, it's hard to think I'll ever get rid of it. And even with a version available on Board Game Arena, you know, sometimes I factor that in. Will I keep the game if I can play it online? I love playing Patchwork in person. There's something specifically that I cannot replicate online with building my quilt on this board, seeing it in front of me, and also playing face-to-face with someone. I feel like it's just such a great game for that. I've played it at my coffee table, I've played it here, I've played it at board game cafes. It's such a phenomenal game that I appreciate more and more the more I play it, that I'm just realizing for how little real estate it takes up on my shelf, I really don't have an excuse to get rid of Patchwork. Even now, I think I'm getting close to it being a nostalgia keep as well. Even if somehow it gets replaced because they come out with Patchwork 2 or something and it beats it on every level, I still don't think I'll get rid of it, because now from a nostalgia perspective, I have so many memories with it and it takes up so little space. Why would I? So I think Patchwork is wholly earned its spot as a game that will never leave my shelf. Oh God, I didn't want anything else to spill out of that. All right, next up is another game that I didn't include last time specifically because I hadn't played it in a while and it was available on Board Game Arena, and I thought, as much as this is one of my favorite games of all time, I could see a world where maybe I don't, or maybe I do get rid of this. I've now realized the error of my ways. I've played this a whole bunch on Board Game Arena recently, and it's made me realize that I want to play this game more, the physical version, and I just absolutely adore this game so much, even more than I thought I did when I did like my top 50 list and stuff. This is such a beautiful and amazing game, and I probably shouldn't have said beautiful because the box art isn't necessarily beautiful, but in the gameplay design, it's beautiful, and that is, of course, Castles of Burgundy. So I played this a whole bunch in the last little bit, and I absolutely adore this game. You know, I still stand by some of the things I've said when I was comparing it to Castle of Tuscany in the video that we have on our channel, if you've seen that, where, you know, Castle of Tuscany does compare favorably in many ways and take the essence of Burgundy and stuff. But I've realized more and more that if I was convinced Tuscany would never leave my collection. I know this is now becoming a discussion on Castles of Tuscany, but I kind of thought that thinking like, oh, they both have their place. But now I'm realizing more and more that Burgundy just can't be eclipsed even by its spiritual successor. This is such a great game that for how complex it can look and how, you know, how much it seems like there's going on, it's pretty simple down to its core, in that you're just choosing two actions on your turn based on the die values. And yes, you can do some manipulation, but you're limited on what you can choose by what's available. You're limited by the number on the die and how much you can manipulate it to what you can take. And you're kind of have this path set forward to you that it doesn't become super imposing. If you're in the early rounds, you want to finish your territories on your board that, you know, have less hexes on them, because you can finish them, you can get more bonus points. Later in the game, that's when you want to complete the bigger ones. That's kind of the strategy you're going to adopt every game. And if that sounds like, oh, well, that's going to become boring over time because you're kind of doing the same strategy, it really doesn't. I've used so many different you know, strategies depending on which tiles I go towards. In the early game, am I able to get enough mines to have a good silver income coming in that I can, you know, be buying more tiles? That can influence what I do. Am I able to get a lot of the yellow tiles early on that affect my abilities and power me up in other ways in past games I haven't played? In this game, did I get no yellow tiles, and I'm having to really rely on, you know, going first by getting a lot of ships and selling goods? Like, there's so many different things, not to mention that I have an expansion for the physical version as well. Like, there's other ways to expand this game too, and it's just every time I play, I am enthralled by how much I love the gameplay flow of Castles of Burgundy. It's a game for me that I don't think I'll ever tire of, because I haven't tired of it yet, and I've been playing it now online for months, game after game after game, never getting bored, always wanting to jump into another one. I just will never get rid of the physical version. It has the nostalgia tie for me. It is one of my favorite games of all time, and it is actually fairly easy to introduce to even new gamers once they get over the hump of the way it looks and the imposing nature of it, and, you know, the bland nature of the artwork and stuff. They may think they're not going to like it. Once you get into those first couple of rounds, it clicks with people, and that's been my experience. Not to mention that it is a phenomenal 2-player game and a phenomenal 3- and 4-player game. I think it's still my favorite at 2, but I've played a lot of Castle of Burgundy with 4 in the last couple months, and man, is it a solid 4-player game. Really, the only downside of 4 players is that it takes longer to get to your turn. It's a longer experience. Other than that, it doesn't lose anything in translation at any player count. So Castles of Burgundy's never leave my collection. It is a phenomenal title. All right, we have 3 more games here, and some of these might surprise people, but I have some good reasons for these. I shouldn't say surprise, they're not bad games or anything. A lot of these are well-renowned games, but you might be surprised to hear that they're never going to leave my collection. So this is one of the newer ones that I've acquired, and this game is called Pictures. So Pictures, we relate to the party on, or I definitely was. This won the Spiel des Jahres in 2020, and Carlo and I didn't play it in 2020 or 2021. I actually just got this year, and have played it a couple times, and man, is this just a great larger group game. By larger group, I think it plays max to 5, but I just mean, like, you only want to play Pictures, in my opinion, with 4 or 5. I really don't see a world that you're going to want to play it with at least for me, want to play it with 3 unless you are a pictures, aficionado, fanatic, and you just need an excuse to get to the table. I just think with more players, it ends up being a better experience. So the reason this is never going to leave my collection is I don't have a whole lot of party-esque games, and I don't mean party in terms of player count. I just mean that I consider party games sometimes to just be this genre of games that, it's a game you don't necessarily always have to sit around a table and have a bunch of strategy involved. You don't have to, have people that are really into board games to have it click. It's a game you can kind of just bring out at the holidays, at the cabin, at a friend gathering when you want something to do where you can still chat and whatever you're playing is going to bring a lot of laughs and enjoyment. And so for me, games like So Clover and Codenames and Ink and Gold and games like that fit that mold. I consider them to be party-esque games because of the type of settings you're playing them in. Pictures is the newest one to my collection there, and it is honestly the one that has so quickly resonated with me because it's so simple in that you are going to have to use every single set of objects in the game, whether it be the sticks and stones, whether it be the shoelaces. You're gonna have to use them all. So you're never at a disadvantage by saying like, oh, I got this one, you didn't have to use this tough one. You're gonna have to do every single thing that everybody else is doing, but every game is gonna be different depending on what pictures are out there, and the discussion and the thought process on like how someone's creating stuff and how creative people can get. You don't have to be good at, it's not like when you play a drawing game and you have to be good at drawing sometimes to really have it be something you enjoy, because otherwise you're being outshined by a lot of other people at the table. You don't have to be super good artist or anything like that to have this game land. Every time I played it with people, I don't think any of us were artists in really any respect, but we're getting so creative in how we're using the objects and how people are able to communicate things can be so impressive that it just becomes this thing where you're referring back to those moments with your friends saying, remember when you used those cubes to try to show us this and somehow we all got it? Like, those are the moments you remember in board game. I remember moments from playing Monstrosity and from playing Wavelength and stuff. There's specific cards that came up or monsters that came up or moments that I still remember because of how hilarious they were or memorable or amazing, whatever they were. And those games end up staying in my collection a lot of times, or I want to keep coming back to because of those moments. I feel like Pictures gives you those moments every single time you play. There's going to be at least one moment that you're going to remember with that group of friends forever or for a long time, and I love having games like that in my collection. Pictures may be the newest one, and you might wonder, why am I picking Pictures over a game like Codenames or So Clover? And I just think because Pictures, honestly, out of them all, may be the most accessible. Codenames is very, very accessible, and I rarely had a moment where I haven't been able to introduce it, but you have to kind of enjoy games that involve words and that kind of thing. Same thing with So Clover. They are both those word style games. Pictures is sort of accessible to everyone. You don't have to be good at what you're doing in the game. You just have to be able to try to, as best as you can, translate a picture into the objects you're using. And honestly, sometimes the worse you are, the more fun and funny it is, because you can find these creative ways to try to communicate to the group. So I love Pictures. I honestly can never see it leaving my collection. It's for sure a slightly bigger box. It might take up more shelf space, but I don't think I'll ever really have a bad game of Pictures, and it'll always be a game that if I have 5 people coming over, especially with some people that don't often play board games, that I'll always recommend as an option for us to play now. So that is Pictures. All right, I got like a precarious tower over here that you guys can't see that's going from smallest game to biggest game, and it's gonna start tipping. At some point, it might all spill in here, and you guys will have this good moment you guys can save. But 2 more games to talk about. The next one I'm going to talk about is the Quest for El Dorado. So the Quest for El Dorado is a game by Reiner Knizia. This is a deck building game that also involves race mechanics. Now, there are a lot of deck building games, and maybe you're wondering, why did you pick this deck building game over any other option, some of the ones that are higher up on your favorite games of all time? And honestly, this one comes down to accessibility for me. It's hard for me to say right off the bat, like, I feel like my opinion changes constantly whether I like Quest for El Dorado better or Clank better and things like that, but they're also very different deck builders. Even though they both have race elements, the flow of gameplay is very different. The reason I'm saying I'm never going to get rid of the Quest for El Dorado is this is such an easy game to introduce to people that maybe don't understand deck builders or haven't played deck builders before. I would say it's even more easy to introduce someone to this deck builder than it is to say Dominion, which is viewed as like the original deck builder, because the theme and the artwork and everything involved is inviting, and more inviting in my opinion, big time, than Dominion. And this isn't supposed to be an El Dorado versus Dominion thing, but obviously that comparison will be made. But also, it's very simplistic deck builder. You have a very limited number of cards you can buy at the start, and everyone can buy the same ones, and there's a limited number of them, so you can wrap your head around the fact that, hey, there's only 3 of this card. If I want one, I have to buy it before someone else does. The deck building process, you only have a hand of 4 cards. It's a lot of deck builders, you'll have more than that, like a hand of 7 or whatever the case may be, or 5 or more usually. This one, you have less cards in your hand. There's less you can do, so that it's a little bit easier for someone first getting into the game to decide what they're going to do on their turn. The race element makes things very frantic, but it's also something very easy for people to wrap their head around. Everyone's played a game where you have your race around a board growing up, whether that be Monopoly or Trouble or whatever. Is it called Trouble? I think it's called Trouble, or Sorry, whatever. Everybody's played a game where you're trying to get across the board faster than everyone else. This takes that, something that everyone will understand, and combines the deck builder into it, and it also opens the door now to play other deck builders. So for me, I constantly have fun with this game. I'm never thinking, oh, I don't want to play El Dorado. And it's accessible for me to invite other people to play deck builders for the first time. Or it's just a great fallback game, too. We can't decide what to play. Why don't we play a game of El Dorado? And this time we'll just randomize what the board looks like, because the board's so modular that it'll feel like a different experience. Like, there's always a good excuse, a good reason to play El Dorado that I just can't see ever getting rid of it. It's a game I will constantly play at least once a year, probably even with other deck builders coming out, and I don't think anyone's going to quite replicate this formula in this exact way. Not to mention that I think there's 2 expansions out that I still haven't played, so if I want more variety, I can actually keep exploring this game in new ways. So for me, it's just never going to leave my collection. I have enough shelf space that I can always justify having this one. You've probably seen it featured on the shelf in the background in a high profile way many times in the past. That's because it's such a great game that I do want to highlight it, and I'll always be recommending it to people. So that is the quest for El Dorado. The last game that we're going to talk about today is a game that, I even surprised myself a little by saying I would never get rid of this. And you may not be surprised by this pick, because it is a well-regarded game that everyone is talking about. Even these days, there was a celebrity post of, what's the celebrity's name? Mandy Patinkin? I'm going to get this wrong. I shouldn't have even attempted to say it. Was playing this game, so it is a well-regarded game, but I really do love it, but I always sort of thought it was just ever so slightly overrated because of how much attention it was getting. That being said, there is a really good reason why Wingspan is never going to leave my collection, and that is because this is one of the games in my collection, if not the top game, that I've had requested by people who come over to play the most. And I say that based on having gone on a handful of dates in the last year, and having people I've been meeting for I've only known for a couple weeks or whatever the case may be coming over. People have either said they've already played Wingspan and then wanted to play it because they felt, rather than playing a different game, let's play one that I'm familiar with. Or if they haven't played it, it's one of those games that when they see the cover, when they see the artwork and the theme, they feel like, yeah, I could play that one. And it's funny because Wingspan is not the most accessible game in my collection by far. There's games that are way more accessible than Wingspan, and I would even hazard to say that there's elements of Wingspan that I find it difficult to teach to people that haven't played board games, as much or ever. And yet people still want to play Wingspan. People continue to play Wingspan. There's something about that theme, about having a game like that in your collection, that I think there's something to be said for that. Because to have a game in your collection, is whether you want to call it a default game, whether you want to call it a fallback game, to have one of those that you can always anticipate someone that you meet in your life or already know in your life, when they come over or when you're going to their place and you need to bring a game over, is going to want to play. It makes it easier to make the decisions of what we're going to play, or to say, oh, what is going to land with this person. Everdell is another one I considered even for this kind of spot, or would consider in the future whether I'm ever going to get rid of it, because it does the same thing when it's with its theme. I've had a lot of people say about Everdell, oh, I've played Everdell, or oh, I love Everdell, and I don't think that they necessarily even love the mechanics of Everdell. They just love the way it looks on the table. And for many, that's what Wingspan is. They love the eggs, they love the birds, they love the theme. They've been able to grasp how the chain happens. They may not even approach it the most strategic out of any game they've played by any means. They may not even play a strategic strategically. They just love handling the components and playing Wingspan. The dice tower, the birdhouse, they love using that. Like, there's so many things going for Wingspan that, as someone who always wants to introduce more people to the hobby, who get more people into the hobby, have them comfortable being in the hobby, always feel welcome in the hobby, and just get board games out there for more people, how could I ever get rid of Wingspan when this game is going to help do that? You know, whatever my thoughts may be on whether Wingspan deserves its spot on the Board Game Geek Top 100 where it is, or whether, you know, it gets a little bit more praise than it deserves from a gameplay perspective, it's really hard to argue with the fact that Wingspan is sort of the modern day Catan in many ways for us, you know, and I'm sure other people have different thoughts that and argue that point, and I think that that's for sure up to debate. That's just my opinion. But in many ways, the way that Catan brought people into the hobby and continues to bring them in as a gateway game, I feel like Wingspan is going to be doing for many years to come. Wingspan is going to be a game that sort of breaks down the barrier between people who maybe don't play board games as much or don't understand what board games can be, and the crowd that is fully invested in the hobby. I feel like this is the bridge between them in many ways. So I'm never going to get rid of it because it's a game I can probably rely on to introduce people to and bring more people into whenever I can. And that's something that's important to me. And so Wingspan will stay in my collection. Not to mention that I really, really do enjoy playing Wingspan. I rarely have a bad game of it. So I will always enjoy playing it as well. Those are 7 more games that I will never get rid of. You can hold me to that, but maybe in the future, for the 3 years, you see one of these games pop up on a game I'm getting rid of video, you can refer back and say, Dylan, you lied to my face. And I will ignore the comment and pretend it doesn't exist because I don't want to answer for my lies. But yeah, these are 7 more games that I will never get rid of. Let me know what you think about my picks and if you agree with them, if any of these games are in your collection you also don't want to get rid of. And since the last video I did, let me know if there's any change on the last time you commented, if there's any games that you thought you may get rid of or never get rid of and now you have, or more games you thought, oh, these are definitely more games I'll never get rid of. And if you're watching this one before you even watch the other video, let me know in the comments what are some games in your collection you will never ever get rid of. They are just either too good or they have fill a spot that no other game can. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, once again, thank you so much for watching. If you are not aware, we have announced the 24-hour charity live stream for mental health that AYCB, All You Can Board, is going to be putting on in support of Sarah Riel. All funds, 100% of them going to Sarah Riel. That'll be happening on May 28th. It's going to be super, super exciting. Check out that video on our channel and check out our landing page. Just go to allyoucanboard.com. It'll redirect to the landing page. We have a ridiculous amount of prize packs. So many publishers that come on board for this. There are some super, super exciting prizes, and you get one entry into every single prize pack just for donating $5. It's that simple. Like, you can get so many potential prizes. You can only win one. You can't win them all. You max one per winner, but max one per. You can only win once. That's all I'm trying to say. You have so many options. So you could end up putting $5 and win a copy of Oath: Chronicles of Empire in Exile. There's amazing prizes. So please check that out. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.